Welcome to our deep dive today, and we're doing something a little different. We're
Yeah,
switching things up, trading in our usual stack of sources for just one, and get this, it's from the Arabic Wikipedia.
definitely different. And it's a good reminder right off the bat that European culture, this thing we're diving into, it's something people think about, explore all over the world, not just, within Europe's borders.
That's a really good point. It really highlights just how far these ideas reach, how they can be interpreted. So the article itself, it jumps right in, saying that Europe, culturally speaking, isn't this one single unified thing.
Right.
It's more like a really vibrant tapestry, all these different cultural threads woven together.
Yeah, it's tempting to oversimplify, right? To be like, okay, what's the one definition of European? But really that's not what this is about at all. This deep dive is all about uncovering those layers, the shared histories, and yeah, even the contradictions that make Europe so unique.
So true. And speaking of history, the article points to ancient Greece and Rome as being like foundational to Western civilization.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how much those influences still resonate today.
Absolutely. You look at ancient Greece democracy, science, the arts, architecture, their legacy is huge. It's like, I don't know, you can practically draw a straight line from the Acropolis to design elements we see in government buildings today.
Oh, totally. And their architectural achievements were incredible. But when it comes to like organization and infrastructure, you can't forget about the Romans, the legacy of Roman law, Roman engineering. It's everywhere in Europe. Just look at structures like the Colosseum, the Pantheon.
And their influence went way beyond the physical, too. The article talks about how important Christianity was in shaping European culture. For centuries, it was like this unifying force.
Absolutely. I mean, you see the influence everywhere, from
Yeah.
philosophical foundations to just the sheer number of churches and cathedrals all over the continent.
Think about the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. It's a stunning cathedral on its own, but it also embodies this intersection of faith, art, and national identity. It's a huge part of the European story. And, even as secularism is on the rise in parts of modern Europe, there's no denying how much Christianity shaped art, philosophy, even daily life over centuries.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, this kind of push and pull between tradition and change, which I guess leads to a pretty big question. Is there even a singular European identity? With so much diversity, can you even define it?
That's what scholars have been wrestling with forever. I mean, on one hand, you have this incredible diversity, right? But on the other hand, you have this shared cultural heritage. Greece, Rome, Christianity, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. I mean, the list goes on and
So it's
on.
like trying to solve a puzzle,
Yeah,
but the pieces keep changing shape right in front of you.
right.
That's the challenge, but it's also the thrill of trying to understand Europe, I think.
Totally. The article even suggests that for some, Europe's identity should be defined by its most significant achievements. It's complex, that's for sure, with no easy answers.
So we've got this ongoing debate about European identity, but what about the stuff everyone seems to agree on, like Europe's undeniable influence on, well, arts and innovation?
Oh, absolutely. The article highlights a bunch of areas: visual arts, literature, music, science, and technology, even.
Okay, so let's start with visual arts. I mean, Europe is basically a living, breathing art history textbook. You've got your Renaissance masters, Michelangelo, Da Vinci.
And it's key to remember these figures weren't just giants in Europe, their impact was global. Artists, movements, all over, influenced by them.
So true. Their work went way beyond geographical boundaries. And it's not just the Renaissance. You see these waves of artistic influence throughout history, Impressionism, Surrealism. So many movements started in Europe and then completely reshaped the global art scene. It's honestly kind of overwhelming when you start thinking about all those artistic treasures, all housed in Europe's museums.
And they're not just objects behind glass either, right? These works are still inspiring and influencing artistic movements globally today, sparking conversations, pushing creative boundaries. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, before we get lost in the Louvre, let's shift gears to literature.
Good idea. The article talks about the lasting impact of European literature, again, on a global scale. You've got everything from the epics of Homer to Shakespeare's plays, which are timeless, to those enchanting and, let's be honest, sometimes unsettling fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm. These works have shaped how stories are told all over the world.
And honestly, who doesn't love a good fairy tale? Although some of those Grimm Brothers stories could get a little dark, right?
Oh, absolutely. They definitely knew how to craft a captivating and sometimes chilling story. But the article covers a whole range of literary movements, much like it does with music.
That might be an understatement. Classical giants like Beethoven and Mozart, The revolution of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones during the British invasion, even modern electronic music festivals like Tomorrowland. Music is like a whole other dimension of cultural influence going beyond your traditional art forms.
And it speaks to how dynamic European culture is, you know? It's not just about preserving the past, it's constantly evolving, always influencing global trends across all these creative fields.
Then there's science and technology. Europe has been the birthplace of some of the most significant breakthroughs in history.
No doubt. The article brings up figures like Newton, Galileo, Marie Curie, Einstein, all these revolutionary figures in scientific thought.
And it's not just the big names, it's the groundbreaking inventions too. The printing press, for instance, absolutely revolutionary for its time. Then you fast forward centuries to the internet, another European innovation that has completely changed our world.
Right. And this legacy of discovery and innovation in science, it's not just a thing of the past. The article connects it to today with institutions like CERN and the European Space Agency.
It's really like this thread of intellectual curiosity connects something like the invention of the printing press
Uh-huh.
to, us exploring space. Kind of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. This deep dive wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about some of those classic European stereotypes, right?
Ah, yes. Those passionate football fans.
Right. Although, as the article points out, it's football, not soccer, in most of Europe.
Yeah.
And in fairness, it does acknowledge how popular the sport is, especially the Champions League.
But it also encourages us to, think outside the football stadium. It mentions cricket, rugby, even the Palio di Siena horse race, this super unique tradition they have in Italy.
Okay, so we get it. Europe loves its sports. But can we talk about fashion for a second? Because, you can't explore European culture without a trip to the fashion capitals of the world.
Of course. The article highlights cities like Paris, Milan, London, places that are basically synonymous with high fashion.
And then there are the iconic designers. Chanel, Dior, Versace. These brands are legendary for a reason.
And that influence, you see it everywhere, shaping fashion trends and perceptions globally, way beyond the runways of Europe.
Okay, but before we max out our imaginary credit cards, can we please talk about the food? Because what's a deep dive into European culture without a little culinary journey?
Get ready for a feast. The article takes us on this whirlwind tour of European cuisine, and it really highlights just how diverse it is. We're talking Italian pasta, German sausages, Spanish tapas, French pastries. I mean, it's enough to make anyone hungry.
Seriously, I'm suddenly realizing I need to book a trip to Europe ASAP. But in all seriousness, this part about food just goes to show that Europe's diversity is everywhere, even in something as simple as what people eat.
Absolutely. And that diversity isn't limited to food or fashion or even art. It goes much deeper to something much more fundamental, religion.
Right. The article spends some time talking about the changing religious landscape in Europe. It's not exactly a secret that religion, especially Christianity, has been hugely influential in shaping European culture, especially historically. But things are changing, right?
They are. The article points to this trend towards secularism, especially in parts of Western and Northern Europe. They cite some statistics from the Pew Research Center, Eurobarometer, and they're all showing a decline in traditional religious affiliation.
Which is really interesting to think about because for so long, Christianity was essentially the defining characteristic of European identity, back when the Catholic Church had so much political and cultural power.
It really is kind of a paradox. You have all these deeply religious historical figures and traditions right alongside this modern trend towards atheism and agnosticism.
A perfect example of how dynamic European culture is, constantly evolving, constantly redefining itself.
And a big part of that evolution is happening right now with immigration and globalization.
Yeah, the article talks about that. Modern migration, globalization, all these new cultural influences coming in and reshaping Europe.
It makes you wonder, how does Europe, with this long history of distinct national identities, how does it handle a future that's becoming more and more defined by global interconnectedness? How do those cultural exchanges shape the European narrative?
Such good questions. It's like we're seeing a whole continent in transition, trying to make sense of its past, while, at the same time, stepping into a very uncertain future. This whole conversation is really making me think about just how complex it all is.
It's about acknowledging those complexities, not shying away from them. Because Europe's story is full of triumphs and tragedies, innovations and injustices. And you can't really understand its present or its future without understanding that nuanced history.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our deep dive into European culture, looking at some more specific examples of this dynamic interplay between tradition and change. Stay with us. That's a great way to put it. It's that dynamic tension, that push and pull between tradition and change that makes exploring Europe so fascinating. So, where do we head next in our exploration of European culture?
Well, the article takes a bit of a detour, actually, into some kind of unexpected territory, the history of the sauna.
Wait, the sauna? Like that Scandinavian tradition, sweating it out in a wooden room. What does that have to do with European culture as a whole?
It's a fair question, but the article points out that the sauna, it originated in Finland, and
Hmm.
Finland obviously part of Europe. And yeah, it might seem like a kind of niche cultural thing, but it actually connects back to that bigger idea of tradition that we've been talking about.
I guess it's easy to forget that Europe isn't just like Western Europe, right? You got this whole other half of the continent with its own history, traditions, Right. and sauna etiquette, I guess.
Exactly. And listen, we could talk for hours about the ins and outs of sauna culture, but the article uses it more as a way to like circle back, to get back to those core things that have really shaped European identity, even as that identity keeps evolving.
Okay, so it's like the article's saying, all right, we've explored the edges a bit. Now let's get back to the heart of what we're really talking about here.
Right. And at the heart of it, you always come back to the legacy of the ancient Greeks and Romans.
You really can't talk about Europe without talking about them. Their impact is just massive.
Hmm.
They're the foundation for so much of Western culture.
A foundation that, as the article reminds us, wasn't always built on peace and harmony. You look at the Roman Empire, for example. I mean, they were known for their military strength, their expansionist tendencies.
It's true. They weren't exactly the kings of diplomacy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to hand it to them. They knew how to get organized.
Hmm.
And their engineering skills were incredible. Some of those Roman roads and aqueducts are still around today.
Seriously. It's a testament to, like, their ingenuity and craftsmanship, for sure. But the article isn't trying to romanticize the past or anything. It acknowledges the complexities, the conquests, all the internal struggles it was all part of, shaping Europe into what it is today.
Yeah, like appreciate the achievement, sure, but don't shy away from the more challenging parts of history.
Yeah.
Which honestly is a good rule of thumb for, well, everything.
100%. And speaking of learning from the past, the article also gets into a period in European history that was totally transformative, the Renaissance.
Yeah, the Renaissance. What a time to be alive. Well, not really, I guess, but still. Art, science, intellectual thought, just this incredible flourishing. It's like Europe woke up from a long nap and was like, okay, time to shake things up.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's a great way to put it. And the article doesn't just mention it like in passing either. It really digs into how important the Renaissance was in shaping like the way we think about Europe today. It even suggests that the Renaissance helped pave the way for stuff like the Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution.
Which makes sense when you really think about it.
Mhm.
The whole point of the Renaissance was to challenge the status quo, question authority, embrace new ideas. It was like this collective aha moment for European culture.
Absolutely. And those ripples are still being felt today. You know, it changed how we approach art, science, how we even think about ourselves as people.
It's amazing to think about how long the impact of those historical shifts has lasted. But we're getting close to wrapping up our deep dive, and I'm curious, what kind of final thoughts does this article leave us with?
Well, it actually circles back to that idea of European identity, but this time there's a twist. Remember how we were talking about those defining parts of European culture? Democracy from Greece, law and order from Rome? The article asks. If those were the big takeaways from the past, what will be the legacy of modern Europe?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's like they're saying all this history, all this cultural development, it's all been leading to this moment. So what happens now? What will our generation contribute to the story of Europe?
And maybe even more importantly, how will that story be told and understood by people in different cultures around the world? This article, being on the Arabic Wikipedia, it's a good reminder that this isn't just a conversation happening within Europe, you know.
It really drives home the point that culture is fluid. It's
Yeah.
always changing, always evolving through dialogue and exchange. And on that note, I guess we'll leave you to ponder those big questions. It's been quite a journey through European culture, and we've only just scratched the surface. But hopefully this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, maybe given you a new perspective on this complex and, let's be honest, ever-changing continent.
We always say, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into the world around you. Until next time.
That's a great way to put it. It's that dynamic tension, that push and pull between tradition and change that makes exploring Europe so fascinating. So where do we head next in our exploration of European culture?
Well, the article takes a bit of a detour into a kind of unexpected territory, the history of the sauna.
Wait, saunas? Like that Scandinavian thing? Sweating it out in a wooden room? What does that have to do with European culture as a whole?
Fair question. But the article points out that the sauna, it originated in Finland, and Finland is part of Europe, obviously. So it might seem like a niche cultural thing, but it kind of connects back to that bigger idea of tradition we've been talking about.
I guess it's easy to forget that Europe isn't just Western Europe. There's a whole other half of the continent with its own history, traditions, and, yeah, I guess even sauna etiquette.
Exactly. We could talk for hours about sauna culture, but the article mostly uses it as a way to circle back, to get back to those core things that have shaped European identity, even as that identity keeps changing.
So it's like the article is saying, okay, we've explored the fringes, but now let's get back to the heart of what we're talking about.
Right. And at the heart of it, you always come back to the legacy of the ancient Greeks and Romans.
It's true. You really can't talk about Europe without talking about them. Their impact is just massive. I mean, they're the foundation for so much of Western culture.
A foundation that, as the article points out, wasn't always built on peace and harmony. The Roman Empire, for example, they were known for their military might, their expansionist tendencies.
It's true. Not exactly known for their diplomacy skills all the time, but you have to give them credit for their organization and engineering. I mean, some of those Roman roads and aqueducts are still around today.
It's amazing, right? A real testament to their ingenuity. But the article isn't trying to romanticize the past. It acknowledges those complexities, the conquests, the struggles. It was all part of shaping what Europe is today.
Yeah, it's like appreciate the achievements, but don't forget about the more challenging parts of history too, which is probably good advice in general.
100%.
Yeah.
And speaking of learning from the past, the article spends some time on a period in European history that was totally transformative, the Renaissance.
The Renaissance, such an amazing time of cultural flourishing, art, science, intellectual thought. It's like Europe just woke up and decided to shake things up.
That's a great way to put it. And the article doesn't just mention the Renaissance, like as a footnote. It really digs into how crucial it was in shaping how we think about Europe today. It even suggests that the Renaissance helped lead to things like the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution.
Which, when you really think about it, makes a lot of sense. The whole idea behind the Renaissance was to challenge the status quo, question authority, embrace new ideas. It was a turning point for European culture.
Totally. And we're still feeling those effects today, how we approach art, science, even how we think about ourselves as individuals.
It's incredible how long the impact of those historical shifts has lasted. But we're wrapping up our deep dive here, and I'm curious, what are the final thoughts the article leaves us with?
Well, it comes back to that question of European identity, but with a bit of a twist this time. Remember how we were talking about those defining aspects of European culture? Democracy from the Greeks, law and order from the Romans? The article asks, if those are the legacies of the past, what will be the legacy of modern Europe?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. It's like they're saying all this history, all this cultural development has been leading up to this moment. So what happens next? What will our generation add to the story of Europe?
And maybe even more interesting, how will that story be told and understood by different cultures all over the world? This article, being on the Arabic Wikipedia, is a good reminder that this conversation is much bigger than Europe itself.
That's a really important point. It reminds us that culture is fluid, always evolving, always changing through conversations and exchanges like this one. And on that note, I guess we'll leave you to ponder those big questions. It's been quite a journey exploring European culture with you all. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a new perspective on this complex, ever-changing continent.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into the world around you. Until next time.